This is the multiple award-winning GardenDC podcast, the podcast about everything gardening in the Washington, D.C. and Mid-Atlantic region. I'm your host, Kathy Jentz. I'm the editor of Washington Gardener magazine. Our content is aimed at gardening enthusiasts, people who grow everything, from edibles to ornamentals, natives to exotics. If it grows in our area, that's what we talk about. Welcome to episode 209 of the GardenDC podcast. In this episode, we talk with Debbie Ward of Prior Unity Garden about all aspects of seed catalogs. The plant profile is on Groundcherry, and we share what's going on in the garden, as well as some upcoming local gardening events and this week's garden tasks in the What's New segment. We close out with the last word on seed libraries from Christy Page of Green Prints. This episode, we're joined by returning guest Debbie Ward of Prior Unity Garden. She was last on the podcast with episode 30, all about seed saving. Welcome back, Debbie.
Thanks, Kathy. It's wonderful to be here.
So that episode was way back in September 2020. Can you believe that? Time flies.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about you and what's been going on in the past 4 years.
Well, I've continued to offer classes and courses, been out there doing some speaking engagements, which is always fun to interact with other gardeners. Right now, I am really getting more serious about writing my first book and am also working on a fun new project with a partner for showing people how to create healing gardens.
Great. I can't wait to hear more about that. Maybe we'll have you back on the podcast to talk all about healing gardens, because that's a topic that I'm super interested in, and I know more and more people are interested in creating a garden sanctuary.
Yes.
So how about your own home garden? Have there been any big changes, or have you grown anything new in the past few years that you'd like to share?
Well, one thing I've gotten into in the last 4 years, which is new for me, is growing flowers. I've primarily been growing food and medicine gardens for most of the last 35 years or so. And over the last 3 or 4 years, I've put in just a flower garden, strictly for beauty. And that's been a fun learning journey for seeing what the differences are on how to start flower seeds versus the vegetable seeds that I'm so used to, and seeing what works and what doesn't, and mixing in annuals and perennials and biennials, and learning to garden with those flowers and those plants versus others.
Yeah, I think once you get into flower gardening, or just for the sheer beauty or ornamental garden side, there's no going back, Debbie. And some of them are edible still and healing.
This is true.
Yep. And some obviously have herbal uses and everything else. But you know what? Even if they have none of those things, if they are just for the pure enjoyment of it, that's still completely worthwhile.
Definitely. And as I've often told people, beauty is food too. So I'm trying to put that in practice even more than I have before.
I like that. Beauty is food too. So our topic of the episode is seed catalogs, and that encompasses a huge world. So
Yes.
Now that most of the catalogs that we're used to get in the mail are now online, some of them are both. They're like a hybrid. Sometimes you'll still get the print version, but you'll go online to order. Some of them, it'll just be still print. There's a few companies that still operate that way, and even a few that I know that you have to call up the person and place the order. There is no online. And then there's the ones that have moved completely online, where you will not get a print catalog anymore, but just their gorgeous website to look through.
Yes. Yeah, I have to confess, I still like getting some of the paper ones because I just find it really fun to sit on a cold winter day at my kitchen table with a nice warm cup of tea and all of the seed catalogs in front of me. It's kind of a computer break occasionally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is so nice to be able to sit with a Post-it pad and a pen and circle things and mark up a catalog. And of course, many of us tear out things from catalogs and save things. And there are catalogs, Debbie, that I have saved from 20 years ago that I will never get rid of, I think. They are just wonderful resources and just
Exactly.
full of stories and information and growing tips. So they're, as good as gold.
Absolutely. I agree.
And for those who have never had a seed catalog come to them, there are many websites you can go to that will mention some of the seed catalogs that we like today that you can request to have an actual mailed one if they do have a mailed version. So you can get on their mail list that way or sign up for their email list. And many of them offer specials, like if you are on those lists. So you'll get emailed maybe it's a discount on something or free shipping, but I would definitely recommend joining a few of those lists if you're not already on them.
Yes, not only do they often give discounts, but they'll send out all kinds of wonderful gardening tips. And that's one of the things I like with the list that I'm on, is it will remind me what to do now, or give a wonderful tip on how to deal with a particular pest, or grow a particular kind of crop from a professional insight. So I always appreciate being on those lists with the companies that I like, because I enjoy in my mailbox a wonderful gardening tip.
So true. And many of the companies have terrific email newsletters. And as you say, they'll have seasonal information, or they'll let you know this is the time in your zone to be planting. And hey, did you forget to order such and such? Because I know while we're talking in September, it's almost too late to be ordering our garlic.
This is true. I tend to order my garlic in the spring, and then I'll forget what I've ordered and have a wonderful surprise come fall when they show up.
I think that's the case for a lot of us especially when we're ordering our bulbs, right? We put those orders in months ago, and they'll usually send you an email that says something like, it will be mailed when appropriate for your planting zone, right?
Yeah.
So it's not going to come the next week necessarily, especially if we're talking about live plant material, which we'll get to later in the episode, and especially when we're talking bulbs. And seed garlic is one of those things that you don't want to have to be storing that for months and then waiting to plant it, or you don't want to plant it at the wrong time for your planting zone.
Exactly. And one tip I've learned to help myself remember these is, when I get that email that says your garlic or your sweet potatoes will be shipped at approximately this week, I'll put that on my calendar. So when I get to that week, months down the road, oh yeah, I should be looking for this in the mailbox, so that plant matter doesn't sit in the mailbox, or I can be expecting it and be preparing the bed that's going to go into.
Yeah, great tips, especially to have that scheduled in for prepping, as you say, because you don't want to have a bunch of stuff arrive and then no place to plant it. And then you're kind of keeping it, not where it's happy usually.
Exactly. Or it sits in your fridge too long and half of it dies and you're like, no, I really wanted this.
Exactly. So let's talk a little bit about understanding your seed catalog. So when you get a seed catalog in the mail and you open it up, there will be some terms and maybe some markings or abbreviations that might not be familiar to you. So let's start with some of the more common ones, Debbie.
Well, one of the important things for me when looking at a seed catalog, I want to make sure that I know whether I'm buying something that is a hybrid seed or not. And this is one of the, I'm not opposed to growing hybrids. I'm not talking about GMOs here, folks. I'm talking about hybrids. Some catalogs will list the word hybrid. Some catalogs will designate them with the capital letter F and then the number 1. And this means it's the first generation of that hybrid. And then there's some catalogs, which are not my favorites, is ones that just don't tell you at all. Most good seed catalogs these days will tell you if it's a hybrid or not a hybrid, but that's going to be the super first thing that I want to see when I'm looking at a seed catalog.
Yeah, sometimes you'll see OP, so open pollinated, and that will indicate it's not a hybrid. And then again, as you said, you'll see F1 or F2, so that will be the level of hybrid, whether it's a first generation or second generation.
Yes, exactly.
And sometimes there'll be Fs down the list, but F1 is the most common.
Yes, it is the most common. I also enjoy seeing some catalogs will give you little symbols if it's heat resistant or if it's cold tolerant. These are also keys that I find useful. And in the front of most seed catalogs that have these symbols, they'll give you a little key as to what the symbol means. So if it's a new company for you and you haven't looked at the catalog before, it's useful to sort of scan these codes and get some idea of what you're looking at. It'll make going through and choosing your varieties easier. Likewise, certainly with food, there's also codes that they'll put for disease resistance. And oftentimes catalogs will have, for each different type of plant, will have the keys for the different disease resistance that different kinds of plants will have. Because, for example, a brassica is going to have different diseases, most likely, and different disease resistance for their varieties than tomatoes will. So those are other really good keys that can help you make choices for the varieties from each company.
Yeah, a lot of times in a tomato listing, you'll see a V for wilt issues that is a better or more disease resistant for that category. And again, you'll see other abbreviations used that way. And then sometimes you'll see treated used, and that's usually something has a seed coating with a fungicide or insecticide from disease or pests to differentiate from untreated seeds.
And those treated seeds can be either organic or inorganic. So that's something else you can look for if you're looking for organic seeds, but you do want something treated. It is possible to find a treated or a pelleted seed that is organic as well as the inorganics. And the pelleted seeds, I sometimes like it's a little clay coating that will often be on the small seeds like your lettuces and carrots. So for all you gardeners out there with really big hands, big fingers, they can come in super handy if you don't want to just do a big scatter and you want to be able to place your seeds. The pelleted seeds can be very useful that way.
So you're paying a little more usually for that clay coating, but each seed can be handled a little bit better because it is in that tiny clay ball. And sometimes I will even see it that's embedded in a strip. It'll be like a seed fabric.
Yes, like a seed tape. Sometimes you'll see that term.
And yeah, so it'll be a seed tape where it's already pre-measured for you. And you'll notice the pricing is a little bit more for those. So say carrot seeds, which are super tiny, maybe they'll be spaced out on that little seed tape, and you're to plant that tape, damp it down, and it kind of just disappears after you plant it.
So yes, it really, depends on what your price point is and what your goal is. Some people are fine buying less expensive seed, scattering a lot, and then pulling up a few of them and as I would say, wasting seed. Other people want to be much more precision on their planting and are willing to pay a little bit more for the seed tape or for the pelleted seed. So it really depends on what's going to work for you as a gardener, which is going to be better for your particular situation.
Mm-hmm. And one of those things when we're talking budget is the amount of seeds that you're getting, because that can vary greatly, can't it, Debbie?
Absolutely. I've seen seed packets that seem to be much less expensive, but they only have 20 seeds, whereas another packet that may seem, oh, it's twice as expensive, but it has 300 seeds. So if you're really looking to be budget conscious, one of the things I will do is I will price out, if I see a variety I really want, I'll pick a couple different catalogs, couple different companies that have that. And I will price out, okay, over here it may only be costing me $2.50, but I'm getting 10 seeds. Over here it may cost me $5.25, but I'm getting 250 seeds. And you can price that and see what's going to be the most cost effective. But even then, in some cases, if you're trying a new variety, you might want to go for the less amount, even if it's more per seed, because you're not sure if you like that variety yet or not. But just some of the different things I consider when I'm choosing what to buy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if it's something, again, that you have a small garden plot and you're only going to use 10, there's no sense in buying a pack of 50 or 100 unless you know you're going to share that or store it properly.
Yes.
And another thing I was looking at in some catalogs is some of the wholesale seeds or larger ones will be by weight. So it'll be by a quarter pound, say for a cover crop, or a scatter seed mix. So you're buying a quarter pound of sunflowers to cover a certain amount of area. So they will usually tell you how much linear feet this should cover.
Yes. And those can come in handy if it's something that you use a lot and scatter a lot. So I tend to buy bulk, for instance, for spinach. So I can, seed a large spinach bed or something like arugula that I know that's going to keep for a few years. And I know I'm going to want to scatter over a large area. Herbs like dill and cilantro, I tend to buy in larger quantities as well.
Those are good ones, especially the herbs, I think. We definitely want more of those.
Yes.
So we can eat more of those and our lettuce greens. So you'll also see things like heirloom, which, some people define that as 50 years or more, or typically it's open pollinated and it's been around for at least, I would say, 25 years.
And I found a good catalogs. They'll tell you what their definition of heirloom is. And that can be really useful to have an understanding of what's going on with that particular company.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a good thing to look for in the introduction if they have one. Sometimes there'll be a formal letter, sometimes there'll be an index in the back, and most all of them will have a planting zone chart and or on their website, so you know what zone that you want to be shopping for too.
Yes.
And then I think the final thing that I wanted to talk about in the catalog common terms is days to maturity. So the number of days to harvest that's expected from planting the seed in the ground or from the transplant. And those are two totally different days to maturity.
Yes. When I'm speaking with people about designing and choosing when they're going to be starting their seeds and when to put things in the ground, the two different on a seed catalog and in a seed packet, you'll see the days to sprout or days to germinate. I see both of those terms seem to be the two I see the most, and they're interchangeable, days to sprout and days to germinate. And this means from the time you put that seed in the soil, you can expect how many days or weeks till you're going to see that little seed sprout. And then adding on to that your days to maturity or days to harvest. Those are the two most common interchangeable terms. That date begins at the time your seed has germinated until the time you can expect to be harvesting that crop. In the food category, you're going to be eating it. And so that's a really nice way to be combining those two numbers, to be choosing when you want to start your seeds as to when the size that you want them to be to transplant, if you're transplanting, and when you expect to harvest.
And of course, we know Mother Nature likes to play jokes on us and things change. So if you're looking at days to maturity and planning a big wedding feast, say, or Thanksgiving dinner around what you're planting in the vegetable garden, I would say add a few weeks onto all of those things.
Definitely. And also give yourself an alternative. I found recently that I will plant more than one variety of something because one may tend to do really well or be really fast or really slow in comparison to the other. And that gives you a little bit more insurance, especially if it is a big event, like you're saying.
Yeah, and you'll usually see early, mid, or late season relative to the normal for that variety. So that could be a radish, could be a green bean, could be a tomato. So if you want something that's the earliest to produce fruit, you would look for something that was marked early season versus late season when you want something. And then we should talk about determinate and indeterminate.
Yes, I was just going to say one of the other things to be looking at in catalogs are growth habits. And so as you're saying, Kathy, determinate and indeterminate are two terms for tomato growth habits. Generally, tomatoes are vines, which would be an indeterminate. It's one of those tomatoes that just keeps going and going and going and gives you this huge plant that you're pretty much going to want to trellis. And then a determinate is a bush variety of tomato, generally used for canning because most determinants, all of the fruit ripens at once. And then you'll also find mixes in there like semi-determinate or dwarf, which leads us to there's looking for different growth habits of different types of plants. For example, if you want a winter squash, but you don't have a lot of room, you can look for terms like short vine. Also, if you're a container gardener, looking for smaller space, can be grown closer together, short vine, those kinds of terms are good if you've got a smaller garden or if you're a container gardener.
I'll often see patio used. So it's like good for a container or patio grown because that's more of a term I think for the Midwest US uses patio a lot. And instead of saying, deck or balcony, that you know it's a smaller size plant. So if it's like a patio watermelon, maybe 3 foot by 3 foot instead of 6 foot vines.
Yes, exactly. And there's a lot of new, wonderful hybrid varieties being developed specifically with patio in their name.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of those, and I'm trialing a few myself, and I'm excited to see some of those smaller introductions for us small space gardeners. And, I was just going to say on the indeterminate determinant, I look for that especially, not just in tomatoes, but in my green beans, because I like to have a ton of green beans come in at once, so then you can blanch them and freeze them.
Yes, me too.
So let's talk a little bit about choosing our seed catalogs. So there are, as we said, dozens, if not hundreds of companies out there now, and it can be really confusing, especially with all the online sales out there to vet. And of course, in the old days, it was by word of mouth, or you would get in the back of your garden catalog a little postcard to send in to get that seed catalog sent to you. And then at the advent of the internet, Dave's Garden popped up. Are you familiar with Dave's Garden, Debbie?
Oh, yeah, I love Dave's Garden.
I don't know how active it still is, but there is still at least the forum that they have on the pages where they give ratings for seed catalogs, plant companies, pretty much anybody selling anything gardening. There's ratings and there's descriptions and comments.
And there's oftentimes some good historical information there. It's a good research tool, I find.
I agree. So you can look somebody up on Dave's Garden, or you can always do Yelp or other Better Business Bureau, and of course ask your gardening friends. But what do you look for rate a seed company, Debbie?
Well, this has been a passion of mine, which I think you know, Kathy, for quite a long time now, where I dove deep 20 some odd years ago into seed catalogs and came up with what my 15 criteria that I use to vet a seed company. And we can talk about that at the end, how people can get that. But for folks to know, I'm an organic gardener. So some of the criteria that I have personally has to do with, are they signed on to what's called the Safe Seed Pledge, which doesn't mean that it's absolutely not going to be GMO. And we can talk about what happened with Baker Creek recently about that. But what it does say is that the company, what it shows me, if they've signed the Safe Seed Pledge, is that company is being conscious and telling folks, hey, we are committed to not selling genetically modified varieties. So that's one of what I call my showstoppers. I have the criteria split between what I call my showstoppers. These are the things that, yep, you got to have it, or probably I'm not going to buy from you. And then I have the others that are nice things to have. So I look for, as an organic gardener, I look for signing of the Safe Seed Pledge. I go through and I also like to see a mix of hybrids as well as open pollinated. That's not a showstopper for me, but it also gives me an idea of what the company's about, because I do use some hybrids, especially if it's a crop that I have a hard time growing. Like for some weird reason, I struggle with cucumbers. I always seem to get cucumber beetles where other people don't. So in those cases, I've gotten to the point where I only buy hybrid cucumber seeds. So those are some of the things that I will look for. Also, like to see these designations we've been talking about. I like the companies to have these kinds of designations, because it allows me to more easily choose the varieties that I want.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
Get low-maintenance alternatives to lawns with Ground Cover Revolution by Kathy Jentz. Reducing the lawn is among the biggest trends in homeownership, with an endless stream of homeowners looking for an eco-friendly alternative to a traditional turfgrass lawn. In the last few years alone, over 23 million Americans converted part of their lawn to a natural landscape, and now they're looking to do even more. The biggest challenge to adopting this new ideal of the perfect lawn? Knowing how and when to replace your turf, and which plants are the best ones for the job. Ground Cover Revolution is here with all the answers you need, and some you didn't even know you needed. Included are 40 in-depth profiles of plants that are perfect choices for replacing a grass lawn. There are options for sun, for shade, for dry and wet sites, and for various climates around the globe. There are choices that bloom, options that are evergreen, and selections that are deer-resistant. Kathy Gents has also included an incredibly useful chart that gives you all the specifics on each of the 40 choices for quick reference and to make your ground cover selection process even easier. Whether you want to replace the entire lawn or just reduce the amount of land dedicated to turf, Ground Cover Revolution will help you usher in a new and improved idea of what a beautiful lawn should be. Ground Cover Revolution is available now wherever you buy books, including Amazon.com and Bookshop.org.
Some of the other things I'll look for is if they've got a nice selection of varieties for each category. And most companies these days do. So that has been one that has been improved over time that I've seen. Some of the other things that I like to vet a seed company is I like to know, if possible, where they're getting their seed. So I find it personally interesting to know if they're growing some seed themselves, if they're sourcing seed from small family farms. Maybe they're a seed house that's buying the majority of their seed from other companies. These are things that me as a seed geek are really interested in. What do you think, Kathy? What do you like for your criteria for seed companies?
So I'm similar to you in that I'm mainly organic and I'm looking for something with a good reputation, good customer service. But Debbie, I'm a sucker for great art and photos and great descriptions, especially when they're written so well, like story written, and gives you great growing information. So like you said, you want something that you can order most, if not all of your seeds from them and not have to do 2 here, 1 there, 2 there. You want to be able to get as many as possible from one source.
Although I confess, I usually buy from about 8 to 10 companies a year. I'm addicted. What can I say? Oh, but these guys have this new thing, and those guys have this new thing. But if you're just starting out, definitely try to stick with 1 or maybe 2 companies.
Yeah, it can be so tempting because those catalogs come, as you say, in late winter, sometimes even before Christmas now. We're getting seed catalogs in the mail. So you're starting to drool over all of those just when you're, in the depths of winter and wanting to grow something. So those are always nice to see. I was looking at your criteria PDF, and maybe we should tell our listeners how they can request that from you.
Absolutely. So my business is prior, as in previous. Unity is in everything garden. So my website is priorunitygarden.com. And you can pick up that freebie with a /SCC for seed company criteria. So that URL is priorunitygarden.com/SCC. S is in Sam, C is in company.
So we'll include that link in our show notes as well, so people can have access to that. And I think that's a worthwhile thing. And we've had you at our annual seed exchanges in the past, sharing about that seed catalog criteria and how to use seed catalogs and that sort of thing. And that's always been a popular talk at some of our past seed exchanges.
Yep, and it is a totally freebie. So a gift. Enjoy.
Yay. So thank you for putting that together and offering that free to the gardening public. So let's dive into the super fun part of this episode, which is our favorite seed catalogs or ones that we've gotten in the past and ordered from. So I'm going to ask you, Debbie, to start off with one of your favorites.
Well, I have a huge list of favorite seed catalogs, I will confess. And it's hard for me to choose one favorite, but I think I will start off with Territorial Seed Company. And the reason I'm starting with that company is because I have found no matter where you live in the country, whether you're an organic grower or an inorganic grower, that Territorial has very, very robust selection for all the different types of vegetable seeds that seem to grow really well anywhere in the country. They're also a medium-priced company. Their germination rates are outstanding. That's another criteria that I have, or what are companies' germination rates. So I have found oftentimes I will recommend them as one of my first recommendations, no matter where anybody is in the country. I've been growing with them for decades at this point.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about germination rates. And most states have in their ag department or under their commerce, maybe, that they are having their seed companies submit to seed germination tests, and they have to hit a certain mark to be able to sell those seeds. So it is a pretty closely regulated industry. But if you're, say, ordering from a seed packet of wildflowers from somebody from Etsy, that's not being regulated at all.
At the same time, I have found that there are some seeds that just do not do well in my particular microclimate.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another reason why, as I've done these criteria, I'll spend, at least 3 seasons testing a company before I'm going to say, yep, I think these guys work.
Great.
The testing the germination rates is one of the things that I do in my microclimate, and it may be different in someone else's.
Mm-hmm. And it's always great to have several opinions because, what is that old saying, Debbie? Ask 2 gardeners, get 3 responses, or
Absolutely.
At least 3, because as in all things gardening, it depends, right? That's the biggest answer. It depends.
Yes.
It depends on your soil, your growing zone, everything.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'll say one of my personal favorites, and it's currently Harvesting History. And if you go to the website, it's harvesting-history.com. And it's run by Barbara Malera, who does our edible column for us in Washington Gardener magazine. And she used to run D. Landreth Seed, which was, I think, over 250-year-old seed house at the time that it closed. And her catalog is one of those that the D. Landreth ones, I still hold on to those. They have like all the provenance, the old history, where the seeds came from. But if you go to the Harvesting History website now, all of that is also stored online for you to access at any time.
That's fabulous. I love the history. It's part of what makes seed catalogs, whether they're online or on paper print, so fun, is to read the history of the different varieties.
Yeah, and talks about usually where it originated, who discovered it, how it was brought to the market, if it was something that wasn't an edible at first, but then, winnowed down and chosen. So always interesting. So
and Seed Savers Exchange is good at doing that as well in their regular catalog. They're also the largest seed bank in the United States, but they're very good, their catalog as well, for those who love to read seed stories. Seed Savers Exchange is another fabulous company that you can read cool stories from.
Yeah, and Seed Savers is a little bit different in that it is kind of more like a co-op almost, a membership, where members of the Seed Savers Exchange, like the name sounds, are growing and donating seed or a very low price, right? And they're making sure that certain open pollinated heirloom varieties are still continuing on, and they're also trying to bring back some of those lost varieties.
Yes. But even if you're not a member, they do have a smaller selection that they pull out from their seed bank to offer to the general public if you want to just test some seeds from them before becoming a member.
And as you said, their online information, their catalog is so full, chock full of stories and information, and even modern things where somebody, was going through an estate, found a little seed pack, started to grow it, and then discovered this was such and such old variety that doesn't exist anymore. Those are always the most fun stories.
Oh, yeah, I love those.
Yeah, so we had talked a tiny bit earlier about Baker Creek heirloom seed, also known as rare seeds. So they have one of those catalogs. When it comes to my mailbox, I feel sorry for my mailman. It's the size of the old Sears Christmas catalog, like from the 70s, right? And it has pretty much everything in there. But they were involved in a recent GMO controversy. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Debbie?
Sure. So on the one thing I'll say real quick is that we used to call the Sears catalog the Wish Book. Now the Baker Creek catalog, I think, has become the new Wish Book.
For sure.
Because of those pictures. They are amazing. So they had carried a tomato variety, a purple-fleshed tomato variety, which is a new, sort of a new thing. So on there, they advertised this Purple Galaxy tomato on the cover of their catalog. And then they talked about how this tomato was the first non-GMO purple tomato in the universe, quote unquote, in their catalog. The problem was that as far as everyone, generally everyone knows, there is no non-GMO purple-fleshed tomato. So Baker Creek had said they had gotten this from a hobby breeder in France. Yet this other company was stating, no, the Norfolk Healthy Produce, I believe, was the company that said, no, we've been breeding this particular tomato-fleshed or purple-fleshed tomato for over 20 years. So there's been this confusion back and forth as to whether the tomato that Baker Creek was carrying was a GMO or not. This is not the first time a controversy like this has happened. We still don't know. There's still murky waters around whether tomato that Baker Creek was carrying was a genetically modified variety or not. They pulled the variety and destroyed the seed because they are a family seed company who is very committed to non-GMO seeds. So it's been challenging for that seed company. I can say in the years I have worked with Baker Creek and bought from them, they are absolutely of the utmost trusted companies that I have, that I work with. So I would still buy from them. If someone is out there concerned that they are selling genetically modified seed, I would dispel that and say, please continue to support this family and understand that they've gotten caught up in something that is still sort of murky. But there have been, it's likely that someone somewhere in that 20 years of creating this purple-fleshed tomato went off and sort of played with it on their own, because this has happened before.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been controversies before about different companies. Territorial has gone through this before. Johnny's Selected Seed has gone through this before. So this is not uncommon. And this is one of the reasons why I got into vetting seed companies in the first place, was to start digging around and find out what's really going on with the company that I know is a really good company. Have they switched, or have they gone through unfortunate situation, which is how I view what Baker Creek has gone through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think those are all important things to weigh. And, we're not going to write off anybody for one mistake, but the fact that they were very transparent about it and, sent an email immediately explaining everything puts them on the right side of things to me.
Absolutely. And what you're saying, transparency is a key. It's with any kind of company. We want to know, we want them to be transparent. We want to know what they're doing. And I respect a company that says, "Oh, oops, we've oopsed." That to me is respectable.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm saying this, make the choice that works for you. I don't personally buy seeds from Monsanto or knowingly any company who is engaging in genetic modification. Again, just providing information for people to make their own choices, because I want all of your listeners to be able to make the choices that work for them in their gardens.
Yeah, I think those informed choices are really important. And so let's talk about another seed company that I think we both like a lot, and that's Renee's Garden.
Oh, yes. Renee's is wonderful. They're just got some really wonderful varieties. I found outstanding germination rates with them. And I'm finding my seed company buying tends to ebb and flow. And I found the last couple years I've been buying more and more things from Renee's, finding interesting varieties, good quality seed, good quantity seed for the price. So they've definitely been a seed company I've been buying more and more from in the last few years.
It's a woman-owned company based in California. I know Renee herself goes to Europe and other places seeking out the best seeds. And I swear by their cut and come again mix. That is just like gangbusters for me. She does provide sample seed packs to garden writers, members of Garden Communicators. So we should be transparent about that, Debbie, that we've probably received a few of those to try out. But I've also gone back and ordered more on my own.
Yes, that's what I have found, is that whenever I've gotten a free sample seeds from her and from Botanical Interests as well, I always find myself going and buying more the same seeds from them.
Yeah, Botanical Interests is another one that's a great supporter of Garden Communicators and sends out a sample. Usually once a year we'll get a fun seed to try out, but then you're going and back onto their website and salivating over more. So I usually end up again buying more, and they have what I think both of them have in common is really great graphics, easy to read seed packets, like especially Botanical Interest. I think their illustrations are beautiful, and the seed packet information on the back, which has a little flap and a part you can cut out to make a seed tag, is an excellent resource for growing.
And you bring up a good point, Kathy, because one of the things I look for in a seed company is the information on the seed packet. I want to have the days to germination. I want to have the days to maturity. I want to have the spacing requirements, sun requirements, all of the more information I can get. That just allows me as a gardener to be more successful in growing whatever that seed is.
And so we should talk about the big guy in the room, Burpee. And I've bought from Burpee before. I've been up to Burpee's trial gardens in Pennsylvania. Have you done that ever, Debbie?
No, I have not. I have not been to their trial gardens.
Yeah, it's in Bucks County. It's a pretty impressive operation there, and they have side-by-side plants that you can check out. And they do an open customer weekend. I think it's usually like the second or third weekend of August every year. So once you're on your list, you can get that invite and go up and check that out for yourself. But I believe they're owned by Ball Horticulture now, which is part of a huge operation out of the Chicago area.
Yes, I have not been growing with them for the last several years because they have historically refused to sign the Safe Seed Pledge. And that's one of my showstoppers. One thing I can say, though, is that Burpee has been a leader of creating new varieties almost my entire life. And there are a lot of varieties that are in the commonly known varieties, historically known varieties that they bred, 45, 50 years ago that have been really fabulous varieties. So I can say that about them as well. But like I said, I'm currently not buying from them. I will about every other year, I revisit and see what they're doing. I'm sure if I went to their garden, it would probably change my mind because I'm a sucker for a lovely seed garden.
Yeah, and they are, fall horticulture in particular is doing some amazing breeding work. So you'll see a lot of introductions coming out through the Burpee catalog and elsewhere. But a lot of it is for farmers or growers, so not necessarily the home gardener, what fall horticulture is doing.
I'd like to call out one other seed company before we move on, and that is Mowing Organic Seeds. And they've been on my list for many, many years. They're 100% organic, which I do like because I don't have to hunt and peck. What I found is if their seeds can sometimes be a touch more expensive, but what I found is if you are having a problem with a pest or a disease on a particular type of plant and you want to go to a hybrid variety that's going to be more disease resistant, Mowing Seeds has the best selection of hybrids that I've seen out there that are trusted and reliable. And one of the other things I like so much about them is they are transparent on the breeders and where they get their seeds, the organic breeders that they get their seeds from and that they partner with. And I really appreciate that. So I wanted to give them a shout out as well.
Excellent. So what we haven't talked about, Debbie, is when you say seed catalog, almost every seed catalog doesn't just sell seeds. Some of them will sell starts, little seedlings. Some will sell full-size plants and bulbs and other things. And of course, tools and books go along with all of that. So maybe when we're wrapping up now, we can talk about some of those other related catalogs, a bulb catalog or plant catalog that we like. Do you have any that are not majority seed, but maybe a plant catalog or fruit tree or other catalog that you like to order from?
Well, I do like Bluestone Perennials is a company I've really enjoyed buying from, as well as White Flower Farm. I bought a bunch of stuff from them years ago, and I found even though their prices are a little high, it's worth it because their quality is so good. There's a company here for fruit trees, Edible Landscapes, that I also really like. I've bought a lot of fruit tree bushes from Raintree Seeds or Raintree Nursery.
Yeah, I get that catalog too. And yes, Edible Landscaping out of Afton, Virginia, near Charlottesville. Mike McConkey is a friend of the show. Terrific offering of fruit trees. And he used to have like a little kind of Reader's Digest size catalog. I don't know that they print the catalog anymore, but you can certainly go online to order. And used to get Raintree. I don't know why I don't get that anymore, but you're right. I've ordered from Stark Brothers, which is what my grandfather ordered his apple trees from way, way back in the day. So Stark Brothers has one of those long time family, decades old family farm type of operations.
And they've also bred some really wonderful varieties themselves.
They do some really interesting stuff. And then I was going to note for bulbs, I love Brent and Becky's bulbs, and we've had Brent on the show talking about bulbs, and that's both for ornamental. It may have a little bit of the edible side, but it's mainly ornamental bulbs we're talking about there. They have a really nice catalog. They still send a spring and fall one in print with great photos. And then another bulb catalog I was thinking of, because it's so fun just to peruse through, is Van Engelen. I hope I'm saying it correctly. Theirs is an illustrated catalog, so it's just little pencil or pen and ink illustrations and descriptions with that.
But they also have another catalog. The same company is Van Engelen, and I don't know how to. I may be mispronouncing it as well. They have a photograph catalog that has less selections that's called Beauty from Bulbs. It's the same company, and you can get pictures or you can get more varieties with descriptions. So same folks, really high quality. I've always found everything I've gotten from from that company to be of excellent quality.
Yeah, I think the illustrated one, now I think about it, it's more bulk size, like 50 on up quantities. And I'm getting that because I'm doing park plantings with my garden club and that sort of thing. So, but even the home gardener can order from that.
Yeah, some of their quantities are as low as 5.
Mm-hmm. And any other catalogs you want to touch on, or anything about seed catalogs that we haven't mentioned already?
Well, I think in a way, one of the most important criteria that anyone can have is attraction. If you're attracted to a company, if you look at a catalog and you go, yes, I think that's a really good place to start.
I agree. I think the graphics go a long way, and I've done a lot of reading about the history of seed companies in the United States, and many people aren't aware that seeds used to be sent to you free from what is the USDA now, and there wasn't that big of a seed industry. And then around the turn of the century, from the 19th to 20th, that changed, and we got those huge seed houses out of Rochester, New York, where some of them still operate out of. But really interesting history if you want to really get into delving into all of that. It's like so tied with the industrialization and history of America as well.
Yes, absolutely. And it's very interesting to see where there used to be a lot more varieties. And people can geek out like us on seed history and seed companies.
Exactly. And speaking of geeking out, so those who are in the Washington, D.C. area or visiting and listening to this, you can go to the National Ag Library at the campus of the USDA in Greenbelt, Maryland. Right next to the Beltway, you'll see the IKEA across the road. And during business hours, you can go in there. You can also make an appointment and see some of those really antique old seed catalogs and look, just as Debbie said, at some of those varieties that we've lost that don't exist anymore, and some of those incredible catalogs from days gone by.
Very fun stuff.
Well, thank you, Debbie, and thank you for sharing your seed catalog wisdom and experiences. And we'll definitely have you back on the GardenDC podcast.
Well, thanks, Kathy. I always like joining and helping grow gardeners.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
In the book The Urban Garden by Kathy Jentz and Terry Spate, you'll find dozens of inspiring and creative ways to grow flowers, shrubs, vegetables, herbs, and other plants in small spaces and with a limited budget. Whether you want to grow on a balcony, rooftop, front stoop, or a tiny urban patio, turn your growing dreams into reality and build a gorgeous and unique garden that showcases your personal style while still being functional and productive. With the ingenious ideas and resourceful tactics found here, you'll be maximizing yields and beauty from every square inch of your space. No matter what you grow, the 101 amazing growing ideas found in the urban garden will turn your tiny urban yard into a treasure trove of green you'll be proud to share with family and friends. Buy your copy today at your local retail bookseller or order it online now at Amazon.com or bookshop.org.
Groundcherry plant profile. Groundcherry is in the Physalis genus of the Solanaceae or tomato plant family and are closely related to Tomatea. Ground cherries are native to the Americas. In addition to the name ground cherry, common names include husk tomato, husk cherry, strawberry tomato, poha berry, goldenberry, and Cape gooseberry. They grow well wherever you can grow tomatoes, that is, in full sun and good drainage. Add compost to the soil, but note, for highest yield, do not fertilize them. Each plant produces large numbers of sweet and tangy marble-sized fruits. Ground cherries can be eaten fresh from the garden. They can also be added to fruit salads, sauces, and desserts. Start seeds indoors 6 to 8 weeks before the last expected frost date in the spring. Carefully harden off all seedlings before planting them in the garden. Ground cherries also make excellent container plants. Flavorful cultivars to look for in seed catalogs include pineapple, Cossack pineapple, Goldie, Aunt Molly's, and Giant. Ground cherries are harvested not from the plant, but off the ground. Check daily in late summer for any dropped fruits. Ripe ones range in color from yellow to orange, and each one is fully encased in a tan-colored, papery husk. Fruits that are slightly underripe will continue to mature at room temperature. Leave them in their husks for several days or longer, then check the berries to make sure they no longer have any green coloring. Ground cherries harvested near the end of the growing season and kept in their husks will stay fresh long after the season ends. They can be preserved by drying or freezing or processing them into fruit leathers, jams, and preserves. Dried ground cherries store well in plastic food storage bags and can be eaten as a snack or added to trail mixes. Once you've grown them, they tend to self-seed, and you can have ground cherries in the same spot in your garden plot year after year. Ground cherry, you can grow that. What's new in the garden this week? Well, I attended the annual meeting of GardenCom, the Association of Garden Communicators. This year it took place in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and we were able to tour both public and private gardens and some behind the scenes at growers and breeders. I was truly inspired, and you can see many photos from the tours we went on and some of the talks and things I attended at our Instagram at WDC Gardener and on our Facebook page, Washington Gardener Magazine. I came home to a garden blooming with cardinal flower red lobelia, and over at the community garden plot, picked several gherkins off the vines and saw that my dahlias are blooming up a storm, so was grateful for that. And garden tips that we shared this week included things you might want to do at the end of summer, beginning of fall, including harvesting your sweet potatoes so that they can cure in time for good storage. So you can look out for the orb weaver spider in your garden, because that's actually a garden friend and not a foe, and he's doing or she's doing great work for you. And several other beginning of fall garden tips, you can find that on our social media. So our garden photo show that took place at Meadowlark Gardens in Vienna, Virginia, this summer has been extended. So if you haven't gotten by to see the photo display in person, it will be up through October 15th. And a local gardening event I wanted to call your attention to is on September 16th, which is a Monday at 7:30 p.m. at Brookside Gardens in Wheaton, Maryland. The Silver Spring Garden Club is hosting a talk entitled Buddy Up with Nature's Predators, Carnivorous Plants and How to Incorporate Them into Your Garden. The speaker is Rich Kreider. The event is free and open to all. Guests are welcome. And again, that is on Monday, September 16th at 7:30 p.m. at Brookside Gardens in Wheaton, Maryland. And you can check out the details at silverspringgardenclub.com. Another local event you might want to check out is at Mount Cuba, and that's on September 28th. And that is a Saturday from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. It is their annual tree festival. See trees in their autumn glory and learn how they add beauty and value to our landscapes. It's free with general admission to the gardens and to Mount Cuba members. Mount Cuba is located just outside of Wilmington, Delaware, and you can find out more details about the tree festival at mountcuba.org. Happy gardening!
This is Christy Page with Food Gardening Network with the last word on 10 tips for starting a seed library for your community, an article by Amanda MacArthur. You've probably seen those little free library stands around where you can borrow or leave a book. One near me has some fantastic books. The entire Lord of the Rings series was in there not too long ago. As much as I love books, though, the idea of starting a seed library is far more appealing. If you already save and share seeds with your friends, and especially if you have a community of thrifty gardeners, starting a seed library seems like a logical next step. In fact, seed libraries, or seed banks as they are sometimes called, have a long history dating back to the early days of agriculture. Seed saving and sharing were common until a few decades ago when large agricultural businesses became the norm. But let's move on to the reason you're here, tips to make your seed exchange a reality. Starting a seed library will take some work and energy on your part, but ultimately it should be fun and a community building project. Beyond that, there is no single best way to go about it. There are, however, some tips that will make the process more organized and enjoyable. This first tip is especially valuable. Number 1, keep it simple. A seed library doesn't need to be fancy. It should be as low-tech as a watertight plastic container. 2, involve your community. Many hands make the work light. It's not just sharing the work, though. By definition, starting a seed library is about community. Take advantage of your fellow gardeners' knowledge and experience and seeds to create a rich collection. 3, consider the location. You want something both accessible to people, but also dry and safe from critters that might enjoy munching on a collection of seeds, such as birds, mice, or even insects. 4, consider the library structure. Those little free libraries for books are out there in the open. Anyone can walk by, browse the titles, and take a book or 2 or 3. Similarly, anyone can leave books. Can you do the same with seeds? Sure. Do you want to? Maybe. Some seed libraries are housed in traditional community libraries. Others are more like exchanges that open on certain days and times. There's no right way to structure your seed library. It really depends on what kind of support you have, how you want to interact with your community, and similar details. 5, pack the seeds. You'll need at least a small supply of seeds as you're starting a seed library. Depending on the size of the seeds, most exchanges place about a dozen seeds in small envelopes that they then label accordingly. 6, label. While it might be easy to tell the difference between a pumpkin seed and a tomato seed, good luck telling the difference between a Whittemore tomato seed and a green zebra tomato seed. 7, categorize your seeds. With all the varieties of vegetables and plants out there, it's helpful to categorize your seeds. Some seed libraries divide them into seeds and plants that are easy to grow and those that are difficult to grow. 8, track your incoming and outgoing seeds. Again, you don't need to get too complicated here. Even a simple ledger where people can write down what they bring in or take out will help you keep track of which seeds are most popular and how many people are using your seed library. 9, turn your library into a book library. If you're starting a seed library, you'll hopefully, get a lot of interested people who don't have much gardening experience. You will also hopefully have experienced gardeners who are willing to help and share information. But there's no guarantee the two parties will ever meet each other. It's not a bad idea to keep a small collection of gardening resources for people to browse through. And 10, assess, reassess, adapt. As your seed library grows, the scope and purpose may change. You may find that your community is especially interested in organic seeds or heirloom seeds or plants and vegetables that are more suited to container or balcony gardening. This is promising. You want your seed library to take on a life of its own and become a place rooted in community. Now, starting a seed library can be an excellent way to meet your neighbors, nearby gardeners, and expand your own collection of gardening skills in seed selection. This has been The Last Word by Christy Page at foodgardening.com.
Thank you for listening to GardenDC. You can become a listener supporter for as little as 99 cents a month by going to the supporter link in our show notes or directly to podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/GardenDC/support. Another way to support this podcast is to subscribe to our monthly digital publication, Washington Gardener Magazine. To do so, go to WashingtonGardener.com or WashingtonGardener.blogspot.com. You can find Washington Gardener on social media at WDC Gardener on Twitter or X, Instagram, and Pinterest, and on Facebook at Washington Gardener Magazine. And be sure to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Please take a minute to share us on social media with #GardenDC so other gardeners can find us too.